All right, so we're here with Michael. How do you pronounce your last name, by the way?
Cawood. Cawood.
So you almost have to be British to say it. And Shane Davis, of course I know your name.
Yes.
And you guys are, I guess, working on the Devil's Angels and Dating, a short film. But first, we'll get started with your origin stories. How you got started in the industry, and I guess tell us how you fell in love with animation to start off with.
Okay, that goes back to when I was about 14, probably watching things like DuckTales on TV, that kind of stuff. It's the usual kind of story, watching too many cartoons as a kid and all that kind of stuff. I guess the only thing that's really all that different was that I kind of made up my mind by the age of 14 that that's what I wanted to do. So I followed through from that point there. And Chase, I think it was Farnham College I went to, was the first experience of sort of seeing how, where you could go to study to do it. And I went over there and I thought I was going to go there, and I prepared all my schooling angling towards to go to that. And then by the time I actually interviewed for various courses and things, I found an even better course over in Wales. And I went to the Glamorgan Centre for Art and Design Technology, which I don't know if that's exactly what they're called these days. They've moved to a much bigger location because they got way more successful over the years. They're actually in Cardiff now, in Wales.
Oh wow.
Yeah, did 3 years there. A lot of fun, loved it. Well, actually, I started doing some short films and things during sixth form college, so that's after secondary school. So, is that what you call it? You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So after high school, so I still hadn't animated until after high school when I went to what was basically college, and we would call it sixth form college or something like that. And my mate Dave and I I met him there on an art course, and we both said, hey, we want to do animation. So we did it on the side when we were supposed to be doing art. And for at least the first, so that was a 2-year course. And for at least the first year, we were really just doing it on the side until we managed to convince our tutors that it was valid and worthy. And then they quite kindly gave us the opportunity to integrate animation into our curriculum. So by the end of the BTEC course, we'd managed to do some animation for the course. I wouldn't say it was the greatest of stuff because it's still an art course and they were pushing us to do quite artsy stuff, but it was an excuse to be doing filmmaking and animation actually on the course. And so that was a lot of fun, and I was just loving that. And then that obviously set me up quite well to go to do an animation course. 3 years there, loved it, trained to be a 2D animator. My mate Dave came along with me as well. He was there for the first 2 years.
And what year was this?
Right, so I went to the animation course in 1996. Did 3 years there, so graduated from there in 1999. And essentially that's when I left and started in the business.
Which is about the time when everything started changing,
Well, yeah, that was the irony, because of course I had trained to be a 2D animator, and there was no jobs in 2D animation. It was all kind of dying at that point. Fortunately, I had a few options when I left. I quite smartly applied for jobs several months before the course finished, because I knew everybody would be applying for jobs at the same time, and got some offers. I was looking at Cosgrove Hall, A for Animation, and Rare. So Rare was CG games, and the other two would have been 2D animation. And at the time, I think Cosgrove Hall's offer was not terribly secure. He wasn't sure whether it would last. And A for Animation was a very, very low offer sort of thing. And Rare, which was I'd heard about, and I knew some people from my course who'd gone to, and I'd heard good things about, and they just made me this crazy offer. Because you don't expect to get very good offers for your first job in the business. In fact, a lot of people don't work for a very long time. You're really lucky to get minimum wage, and they made they just happened to be in the habit of making very good starting offers.
Now, you had a friend working there at the time? Did that kind of help you out?
I sort of I knew people by proxy sort of who had gone there, and one person I thought I would meet there, who ironically had moved on just like a mere month before I got there or something. But basically, I went there and it was just like nirvana. You know, it was like nothing had been seen before, and the only thing I had to kind of get used to was the idea that I was going to do CG animation. But fortunately, I could definitely see the value in doing that, and they were going to train me, so I went for it. And it was probably one of the luckiest things I did, because 2D animation didn't really, kind of bombed after that point. So yeah, I got started there, and I was there for another 7.5 years.
And you got lucky enough to work in a lot of the cinematic department.
Yeah, well that was the other, I went to Rare and I knew of them from having made things like Donkey Kong Country, and I thought to myself, okay, I'm going to be doing guerrilla run cycles, aren't I? And like the director of the game, Lee, took me into me and my other friend Phil. This other guy Phil had also started on the same day as me, became my friend over time, and we both were taken into their screening room where they do all the motion capture and also have a big projection screening area. And he screened the game that we were going to work on. And then Phil was a programmer, and he said, right, Phil, you're going to be doing da-da-da-da, and Mike, you're going to be doing all the cutscenes. And I just went, woohoo! Because that was like better than I could have expected.
Now, did they pick you out to do that because of the stuff you had on your reel ahead of time, or?
I was never told why I was picked out for that. That was just what they needed, I guess, at the time.
What great news to hear.
I know. The art director had been doing them up to that point, and he was busy with modelling a lot of the time, and he was always working on lots of different games. And the tools were a bit shaky, so they still needed some work. So I did spend a good portion of my time helping them debug all the tools, but essentially I was dropped in the deep end and I was doing cutscenes. And that was pretty scary stuff, but a lot of fun. I was using Silicon graphics machines back then, and I had to get used to the idea of learning a certain amount of code, tapping into Unix and things like that. So it was a very different way of working from 2D, but they were pretty relaxed about it, and they give you a lot of time to learn. I know some other people who'd started not long before me, who had taken like 6 months to learn Maya or something, and then I came along and I learned what I needed to learn in about 3 weeks.
Now, what version of Maya was this?
About 1.5, I think. Something like that.
Back when you couldn't just play blast something very easily.
Oh, you could play blast.
Well, it would just take a lot longer. You wouldn't be able to like see in real time your animations, correct? That's from what I heard.
Well, the thing is, of course, you're working with game models as well.
Oh, okay.
And I started out on it was supposed to be a game for the Nintendo 64. So the geometry was very, very simplified. But the skeletons were still the same sort of complexity.
Okay.
So yeah, it didn't work in complete real time, but as time goes along, it's always the same. You're always a little bit behind perfect real time because the models just get more sophisticated. Yeah. So yeah, it was back when it was called Dinosaur Planet, and so I was doing a lot of dinosaurs and the two lead characters, a female and a male. Although actually, the male didn't turn up for a while. It was a female character who then, they used the same skeleton animations on the male. So the male kind of looked a bit camp for the first year until we'd replaced all the animations.
Okay. Yeah. So, okay, working in the cinematic department, you know, how much did it teach you about telling a story? Was that something you kind of already knew and you just utilized those skills?
Well, my animation course had really taught me a lot of that, and I'd done so many short films myself even before I got to that I had a pretty good understanding of it. Okay. But I will admit that the flexibility of working in games cutscenes was just, well, most of the time you didn't have enough time to storyboard everything and plan it all out. Occasionally I tried to do that, but the pace was too quick. So you just had to get used to the idea of making up shots as you went along, and we actually used the control pads to control the cameras. So literally you'd have two screens in front of you. One of them's a certain graphics machine to your right, and then the other one is the game to the left on a normal television, and a remote control, or not remote control, sorry, a games controller. So I was using the N64 games controller, and you would basically sort of move the camera around until you got it where you want it, then you could press a button to set a key, and it would appear on the graph editor on the Silicon graphics machine. And then you could go through the time slider and this sort of thing. And then I got so good at that after a while that I could actually fly a camera in almost real time around a scene to show a director how I plan to do something. Like if they had, all right, we need to do a cutscene where we arrive in this valley and the camera sweeps out here, shows the dinosaurs off to the left, and curls around the corner, shows the doorway over there, and comes back to the camera. And I would do it in real time with the controller and say, is this what you're looking as I would fly through it? Sorry, you can't see me. Yeah, you could do that quite effectively, and then when he could say yes, something like that, you could then just go through it, setting keys like this, that sort of thing.
It's kind of a precursor to a lot of what they're doing in Avatar with being able to move the camera around in real time.
Ironically, it takes me way longer to do a camera now. I mean, I've got a lot more control over it, but at the same time, back then it was beautiful to have that flexibility. And I particularly liked it when we switched to the GameCube and we had the GameCube controller, because that was the best version ever. I've never had better control of the cameras than when I was using that. That was really good.
Did it feel clumsy at the time?
Well, the only trouble with it was that you don't have the flexibility like you do in most cases of just going, this is your shot, that's a separate entity, put it over here, now do a different shot and then cut them together. I had one camera for the whole thing. And at the time they didn't even have tools for making it do, say, a snap cut or a jump. You would have to make sure your keys were perfectly one frame next to each other, and occasionally you would see it fly from one location to another or something like that. Yeah, there were certain things you didn't have a lot of control over, and I kind of forget about it now, and I assume it was all the same, but I know there were struggles at the time. Animation-wise, though, we used to just sort of make little pieces of animation and then string them together in proprietary tools to make up the scenes. And because we started on the N64, we only had a limited amount of memory, although we had twice as much memory as most games because we were going to launch on a cartridge that had double the memory on it.
Alright, so after you were done at Rare, where did you move on from there?
Well, I got an opportunity to go to Australia and work on Happy Feet. Ironically, the guy who was interviewing me actually told me that he previously worked for Microsoft as well, and he knew that you could apply for a sabbatical. So I applied for a sabbatical from Rare for a while, and I went down to Australia, worked on Happy Feet for about 5 months, and then came back, and they'd held my job for me, so it was really, really very mature of them.
Very cool.
I worked for them for a while longer, but I kind of decided that I wanted to move on at that point, and I'm going to skim a little bit quicker because I went to a few different companies. I spent 6 months up in Scotland working on a feature film up there. I actually, within about 6 weeks, was promoted to animation supervisor. It was a somewhat troubled project, which still isn't out yet, but we're looking forward to seeing it.
Oh, wow.
And then I went down to Sheffield. This is still back in the UK. Worked for a visual effects company there. They were doing short things and game cinematics and commercials and things like that.
That was the moving picture company, or?
No, actually that was Arc VFX.
Oh, okay.
We did a really cool commercial for the Singapore Navy. Look that one up. But that got me noticed, and I entered the 11-second club at that point and bumped up my reel a bit. And yeah, then I got the opportunity to work for NPC in London. I did a commercial, then moved over to work on Narnia, which was the first Narnia film?
The Prince Caspian?
Oh no, that's the second one, isn't it? Right. So,
yeah.
So the second Narnia film, and I spent about 4 months working on that. At which point I was well entrenched in the London scene. I quickly moved over to Passion Pictures, did a game cinematic / commercial for them. Then at that point I was starting to think about seriously spending some time working on my own short film idea, which I'd actually come up with. I was thinking about it having when I came back from working on Happy Feet. So I took a break there, did some concept art, enjoyed the summer because I'd missed a lot of summers. Yeah, I was chasing it around the world. I was going into winter all the time. So I did some concept art there, went back to Passion Pictures very briefly, did a little bit of work at Glassworks for another commercial, and somewhere in there I sent out a job application to a games company here in Austin. and I think I just happened to tick all the right boxes for what they were looking for. Having already had lead animator experience, I didn't know at the time what they were working on, but I had the right kind of reel for the kind of stuff that they wanted. And I also worked for the same sort of publishers they had in the past, so that I knew a lot of the cultural things that they had come from. And they gave me the opportunity to come over to the US, and they rolled out the red carpet and treated me absolutely fantastically. I came over, checked out the place, and ironically I got into a position where I had 3 job offers simultaneously by the end of the week, that I was just coming here to Austin to check out what the place was like. So by the Friday that I was here in Austin, I had options to, I was offered assistant director on a CG TV show in Melbourne. I could also have done a shorter gig up in Canada working on what later turned out to be District 9, or come to Austin, and I had been treated so well, and I just loved all the options that were presented with me here in Austin, so I came here.
Which company was that?
And that was for Armature, and I was there for a couple of years actually. Unfortunately, everything is still under NDA for them, so I haven't discussed anything I did there. Sorry.
Well, I'm sure the weather also made you want to move down here.
Yes, well, that was one of the biggest perks, because I was so tired of living in rainy old England. So, yes, the weather definitely was a big perk. And although I was expecting it was going to be a bit like a desert, it being Texas, I was half expecting to learn how to ride a horse and everything. I was very pleasantly surprised when I found out how green and hilly it was, and it's very, very nice, yeah, so I've been here since then.
Okay, so the overall working environment, was there any culture shock in terms of being an animator? I mean, I'm sure you're really worldly.
Not a heck of a lot of stuff. I mean, I suppose I had to get used to, that company actually did what you call there's a term for it, Scrum. Is that the right word?
The 15-minute in the morning?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they're very, very regular meetings where everybody says what they're doing. So that was a slightly different approach, and I can definitely see the value of doing that. You can kind of tell that you have to figure out what stage of production you're at as to how many meetings you try to have, otherwise it gets unproductive. So that was a different approach. But other than that, it was very much like I'd done before, and it was like slipping back into comfortable territory. It was a lot like working back at Rare.
Very cool. Well, I guess, I mean, that pretty much covers everything up until Devils, Angels, and Dating for the most part, right? I mean, was there any major... Oh, well, of course, PSYOP.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about that experience at all?
Sure.
I'm sure that was great.
I mean, that was very brief. It was just, I was at the point at which I was thinking about moving on. I actually had a couple of offers to work in LA, and the PSYOP one sort of trumped it, and I went over and worked on a project there that I'm not entirely sure that it's actually properly released now, so probably shouldn't talk about it too much. Yeah, I worked for them for a couple of months, and that was really incredible. That was really, really high-end stuff, and like being in the bear pit as far as animation was concerned. It was the most intensive animation gig I think I've ever done. But then once I was done with that, I came back to Austin and settled into working on the film full-time, essentially.
So, okay, what was your thought process from, I'm going to be a freelancer or a contract animator working for a company, to, okay, now I'm doing my own thing? What clicked in your mind?
I guess by some time ago, I had recognized that I'd been in the business for a decade, and I hadn't had all the opportunities I'd necessarily wanted. Part of that, in very many ways, is down to the fact that I was working from the UK, and the UK doesn't have quite as many opportunities as you have here in the States. I mean, I got to go to Australia and moved around the UK quite a lot, but still, you always feel like you're kind of picking up the scraps a little bit when you don't have the option of working here in the States. So after a while, I just decided I've got to create my own opportunity. And money didn't seem as important as creating my own opportunity. So when I went to work on Happy Feet and I saw what everybody was doing there, how much everybody was putting into their own personal projects, and I saw how much respect people who had previously done short films were getting. Now, ironically, I've done short films too, plenty of them. It's just that they were in 2D, so no one really cares anymore. So I just thought, okay, I have to kind of do my own CG short film. And everything I'd been doing up until that point was way too long to make, so I decided to start on something new. And that was the germ that kind of started it off, the seed, so to speak.
And what year was that?
That was back in 2006. So literally the idea for it was on the plane coming back from Australia, and the first night I was back I wrote the first draft, which I still really like, but it's nothing like the current film. And I just kept developing it, spent a couple of years just pecking at it, not full time, just sort of, I would get new ideas, write a new version of the script, and I must have gone through 20 different drafts that were totally different. And a lot of the time it was trying to preserve what I wanted to say, but at the same time make it achievable. And after a while it becomes all about making it achievable, because there were a lot of things I didn't know at the time. So I didn't model and texture, I didn't want to have to make lots of environments. So there were a lot of things that I changed in order to make it achievable. So in many ways it's not totally the film I wanted to make when I first started out, but that film would have been 20 minutes or half an hour long and it would not be finished.
Right.
Okay, well let's get into Devil's Angels and Dating. I guess, you have your own podcast where people can go and watch and listen to, everything about the project. You've done multiple interviews, so we try not to cover, something that hasn't already been covered. And you are so great about putting up information for people who are interested. And I guess, how would you classify the project? I mean, would you call it, other than of course an animated short film, and would you say that it's crowdsourced, or is it?
Well, in some ways I started to think about it almost as something similar to the 11-Second Club, because I could kind of recognize that if all I did was start one thread, say I'm making a short film, and go at it, most of those projects had died. So I had, in order to attract decent talent, I knew that basically I have to serve their needs, and their need is to put shots in reels. And so what does that really well? The 11-Second Club. So I essentially started to think about, okay, well, how do I make this an extension of that almost, and feed the same community but with different needs. Because the 11 Seconds Club's great, but it only does a specific thing really well. And I just thought, okay, well, if I make a short film and I structure a good system for people to come in and work on it, but I provide them with something a little bit different. Essentially, they get direction, they work in a studio-like environment, only online, and the idea is already given to them, the rigs are already given to them, they don't have to worry about lighting and all that kind of stuff. So in very many ways it was kind of a hybrid between trying to make a short film like most people would with one thread and trying to recreate an 11-Second Club-like experience for people. And it has proved very successful because a lot of people have done numerous shots on the 11-Second Club, and when they've been looking for something different to work on, they've come over to us, done a couple of shots with us before then going back or getting a job or something like that. So it's been very focused on getting people's portfolios improved. But the downside to that is you also have to kind of accept that people will move on. So there haven't been many people who have stuck with the project from beginning to end, because they come in and they do a couple of shots and then they move on and get their jobs.
Well, our last podcast was about teams and what makes a good team, and it's really interesting to me how you have kept a collaboration of so many people from so many different places that are in and out. What are the challenges? And Shane, definitely, if you want to mention any of this, the challenges of managing a team like that, where the people aren't in the same room, it's not the exact same people all the time. You always have to constantly be talking to them and connecting with them in a personal way. How do you do that?
Well, there's a lot of different issues with it. I mean, as you said, for starters, everybody changes. So you kind of have to repeat yourself a bit. And so one of the challenges was just making things as clear to every new person that comes along as possible, so that they quickly understand all the things that you need them to know without you repeating yourself too much. Even today, though, we still are repeating ourselves. So yeah, certainly when somebody first arrives, you'll say the same thing to them every time, and you just have to accept it and get used to that.
Yeah. And you did a lot of the prep in like the animator's handbook too. So like all the questions when a new teammate signs up and they're going to be given a shot, you're like, here's everything you need about the project. And yeah, I mean, if you read through it, it tells you everything that you really need to know.
Essentially, if somebody asks a question again, I'd be like, oh, okay, I've written this 5 times now. I'll put the same answer in the handbook. But the downside to that is that the handbook gets so big that people will skim through it or they'll miss something really important. So now we're at the other end of the scale where there's so much information for them, it's hard to know how to funnel them towards the right stuff. If I had enough time, you would make a system that condensed exactly what they need to know into like 5 things, and then drip fed them another 5 things a little bit further down the line. Our system's just not that sophisticated yet.
Well, and those are some problems that you guys struggle with. Now, what are some of the benefits of having a team like this where it's just not the same people all the time? I mean,
well, they all bring something different to it. The snag is you can't quite tell who's going to bring what at first. It's a bit of a gamble. But we've had some really, really good animators do things that were way better than what I would have expected to have done if I'd done it myself. But we've also had the other extreme where we've had to almost train somebody online. So the challenge is trying to look at somebody's portfolio, figure out where they are in their career, how much free time they have, and give those people the most appropriate shot. But even then, beyond that, there's almost nothing you can do. You can't really predict what they're going to, what their situation is. They might say, I can work on this 2 hours every night for the next 4 weeks, but then only work on it for an hour.
A week.
Yes, exactly. So you can't really predict it, and to some degree there's a certain amount of luck. If you keep your fingers crossed, somebody will surprise you.
And you're waiting on their time to actually work on it, which is stressful in a way. I mean, you have to keep on waiting, and am I going to reschedule this to someone else?
Well, for a while it's okay, because you just make sure there's enough things going on simultaneously. Then if one person's being a bit slow, it doesn't matter, because there's progress being made somewhere else. But if you, what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, lost it.
Do you guys, do you find that with very different animators, not all in the same room, working on different shots, that you do a lot of directing that sort of creates a similarity between shots, a consistency between shots? Is that where you find yourself doing a lot of the...
Yeah, to some degree I give preference to animators who already I know are capable in their portfolio of the style I'm looking for. Sometimes, for example, I've had people come in who do a lot of television animation where they're trained to go super snappy and everything stops and dies, as in it hits a pose and it completely stops. And that might be the only animation they have in the reel. Where I've always tended to go for a slightly more realistic approach where we have moving holds. And so sometimes I literally had to say, everything in your reel stops and starts. Are you capable and you understand the principles of doing a moving hold? And you'll sometimes have to go through the motions a little bit early on when they're so used to doing the stop, start, stop, start approach that you'll have to say, okay, this needs a moving hold here, because things would die. It would be quite common, for example, to someone to place a hand in space and they would do something else and this hand is not moving, it's just frozen in space and you can tell it's IK. So you have to encourage them to think of the muscles moving down the arm and think about the tension. Now think about the delay and the weight of that arm. And sometimes I was finding myself explaining those principles in text form, which is quite tricky.
No, sorry, good.
No, I was just thinking, I imagine that would be...
As a director and producer and pretty much wearing all the hats, you guys are both doing everything with it. How much do you want to take on the role of motivating and teaching somebody, and how much do you not, you want to pull away from
Well, we do tend to say that we don't want to take on students in most cases because we haven't got the time to teach. If I was teaching everything online, then I would need to have a full-time job. I could not possibly get the film done in a reasonable amount of time. So we always look for somebody who's got enough experience to get that they look like they've had enough years experience in their resume and they've got enough in their portfolio that they're capable of doing it self-motivated. And hopefully all I'm doing is guiding them to keep them on track. I tell them the things they couldn't possibly know, like what the character's thinking, where it's going before the shot and after the shot. They still have the animatic to see their shot in context as well. But ideally, I'm only directing the performance. You still do, though, as you say, you've still got to supervise them to get a consistent style as well. So it's really those two things, performance and style. And if I'm having to direct more than that, if I'm basically becoming the lead animator and explaining how to animate, then it becomes a problem. We've had a few of those, and they usually stretch on a very, very long time. We've had a couple of shots that have still managed to make it. They've gone all the way from beginning to end. It's just that they've ended up taking 6 months to get a shot done or something like that.
Have you had any where they took a good longish while with their first shot, they do that shot, and then you do give them a second one and you see the progress that they've made and there's a much quicker turnaround?
Yes, it's scary though at that point. because when you first give it to them, it's a gamble and you don't know what you're going to get. So there's nothing to fear. It's just like you have to have a go at it. They look like they're capable of it, you give them a chance. But then if it's taken that long and taken that much energy to do the first shot, and you realize that at the end of it, I had to teach them, basically, then it becomes scary. Then you're thinking, okay, do I want to invest that again? Or but in most cases, what you also have to do is, if somebody's put in the hard work at their end, you have to honor it and give them back what they're looking for. Because in a lot of cases, their first shot is not going to be the glamour shot, the one that they wanted for their reel. So if they have put in the hard work, I will usually give them another chance and on something a bit more adventurous. And we have had a couple of people who have started out at that sort of real slow crawl, but then went on to do a second shot and they found it easier the second time, and the third shot and easier again. And then by the fourth shot, they've got a job. So it feels great to be able to do that. But obviously we can't do that for everyone. And so I have to be quite picky when I'm finding people in the first place. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a lot of people that are fundamentally against the idea of working for free.
Yeah.
What would you tell those people, that are that they don't like the idea of it, period, and they think it's not fair?
Well, as I say, this project is, I tend to think of it more like the 11-Second Club, and it's a parallel to that. It's something for your portfolio. But yes, I have come into conversations about this kind of thing to do with the short, because the other thing that people don't necessarily realize is that there's not really many ways you can make money out of a short film. Most people think that because it's a short film, it should be a job and that they should get paid for it. Now that belief has kind of gone away over time. I haven't actually come across that issue now for, I don't know, a couple of years, but certainly in the first year that I was working on the project, attracting people to it, people would sign up and say, okay, how much does the gig pay? And then they had an objection to it when they realized that it wasn't. So I had to be very clear in everything I said, every introduction, that this was a volunteer thing and it's for your portfolio and it's a give and take process. And if we do happen to make money, that there would be a way to give that money back to the people who worked on it. But realistically, we don't expect to make any money out of it. So that's essentially where we stand. But if you say all of that, then most people, they figure out which side of the line they're on, whether they want to go and do paid work or whether they want material for their portfolio. So really we're looking for people who are developing their portfolios. In fact, the very best people we've worked with have been people like myself who just partway into their career hadn't necessarily had all the opportunities they wanted, and they wanted to put shots like these in their portfolio. But yeah, I don't think we've come across the issue now about the pay thing for quite some time. I still feel guilty sometimes. I read the threads about should people do unpaid work, especially about when people get tests for companies and they have that same conversation, oh, should we be doing a test for them? Isn't that a bit like unpaid work? But actually most of the time those tests are not used for the actual production. But yeah, at that point I usually sort of feel a little bit guilty because it feels a bit like I'm sitting on that line and it's debatable as to which way that can go. But all I can say is if we ever made any money, then we'd make the best effort we can to divvy it up and give it back to the people. So all we can do is hope that they stay in touch and make sure that their contact details are still on the website.
So realistically, what are your guys' plans for, having people watch this? I mean, how are you guys going to get it through everything else?
I'll let Shane answer some of the questions.
Well, I mean, ideally, we're going to go the route of putting it into festivals, and hopefully we have as good as luck as others have with their shorts of being picked up by other companies, and hopefully it could turn into a feature, or the same characters could be turned into commercials. But the team's obviously getting a finished product on their credit, so which is great. And also, I mean,
we're exploring a lot of different ideas.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily tell everybody all the ideas because sometimes it can be disappointing. If you say, we're doing this, this, and this, and then you fail to do this, this, and this, and only get this one, it feels like you're failing, but actually that's a really good rate. If you try 10 different things and only 1 out of 10 things works, sometimes that can be considered a very high success rate.
Yes. Yeah.
But we're trying a lot of different things. I don't know whether we're supposed to mention it or not, but we can probably say we have talked to people about making it a stereoscopic film. We've talked with numerous companies about collaborating. There's a lot of companies out there that want to start their business in some way or another, and they need a quality product to sort of tie into to make them look good. And so I've, over the years, had the conversations with those.
So you were talking about working with the animators, so the animators are from various parts of the world, always sort of in contact via the internet. Are you bringing it all back? Are you funneling it all back together with the finalization department, the lighting department, or is that also a?
Well, what I actually found, although I attempted to recruit for every single department at every stage of production, what I found was quite useful was that a little bit like some sort of sandwich. I would be the start of the chain. Somebody else would work on it. Then if it comes back to me again, I get the opportunity to correct anything that they were way off on, and then it can go to someone else again, and then it comes back to me. So by it coming back to me, but each time it comes to me, it's a small job. It's not something that'll take me forever. It might only be an hour of work or something. But it allowed me to make corrections and keep things on track. So, for example, I did most of the layout. Gert actually helped out with some of the layout too, but in the end I had to do most of the layout myself, I guess. I then handed that to the animator, supervised the animator through to completion. Then there's a step that I call final layout. It's always referred to in different things in different companies, but some of the companies I've worked for called that final layout. And essentially what it meant was you were turning on all the dynamic elements in the shot if they weren't on already, baking a few things, reframing the camera a little bit, putting props into the objects, props into the scene that weren't there before, that kind of stuff. I might occasionally fix a little bit of animation if there was something wrong. Or if
Let me ask, how did the animators feel about that?
No. Most of them have moved on a long time ago, so it doesn't really come up very much, but 1 or 2 were offended by the idea that it changed. Until they kind of realized it sort of had to happen, because sometimes shots got rearranged, and like a character has a left hand out at the end of one shot, but then you rearrange the shots around and suddenly there's a continuity error between one shot and the next. And so it's not a big deal as far as the performance is concerned for me to go in there and move a hand down for consistency, but it did have to happen on several occasions. And the worst one really is when you have to change something in the face. If at all possible, I'll send it back to the animator, but if they've long gone and moved on, I've had to occasionally change an eye line or something like that. Because if you move some shots around or even flip them or anything like that, suddenly they're looking in the wrong direction at the wrong time. So I occasionally had to change an eye line, but I avoid it as much as possible.
Has anyone ever sort of flat out objected to?
There was, I think there was one animator who said that he would have preferred it if I'd given it back to him, but he wasn't active at the time. And I think I'd tried to get in touch and eventually had to hand it to someone else, and he just happened to come back into the community at a time later on when that other animator had reworked his scene. So we did have a bit of a debate there, and we kind of settled on the fact that it was necessary, and it was just unfortunate that it had played out that way. So there is plenty of politics. There is tons and tons of politics, and to some degree I've just kind of hardened to it a little bit and set rules, best practices, and then wherever possible I let people know what those best practices are, so that they're forewarned. So it happens less and less as we go along. Like I tend to say to everybody that really we're looking for people to be posting reasonably regularly, and that could mean if we don't hear from them for 2 weeks, I might give them a little nudge. If I don't hear from them for a month, I might give them another nudge and warn them that their shot might get reassigned if it's a high priority or something like that. And then I'll eventually tell them, if I still haven't heard from them 2 months later, that their shot's getting reassigned or something like that. So if someone says, well, what's the deadline? There usually isn't one, but we'll say, as long as you're posting at least once every couple of weeks or more regularly than that, if you're capable, then we're good, sort of thing. But once the animation's done, I tend to go into final layout, and another step is just kind of optimizing up all the scenes and preparing them for lighting, and then it does go out to someone else to do the lighting. But we've actually designed an automated system for the lighting that to some degree pulls it all together in a very consistent way. And so it has a fairly similar look. Beyond that though, it is up to the lighters to look at other shots around them and try and match those.
And you found that works pretty well?
Mostly, yeah. Obviously every single lighter that comes to it has their own tricks, and if anything the biggest downside is really just the natural inclination they have to want to use every trick in the book. And the more tricks they use that are not the ones we suggest, the more inconsistent it looks. And so you will have to say, oh, okay, you've thrown a pink light on that character right there. Is it possible you can change the colour of that? Because there's no more pink lights in any of the shots around it, sort of thing. But for the most part, it's not a huge problem. It's because we've dictated a lot of the lights that are used, and the whole rig is set up a certain way. And we've made a video that describes roughly what they have to do, so they don't go stray too far from that. And especially once they get onto a second shot, they know what they're doing.
Now you've developed a lot of systems and strategies for managing the team and making it work as smooth as possible, as hard as that is. Are there any other projects that you have looked to for inspiration or reference and how to manage that? I mean, there are other, there's been other projects that kind of do something similar. Is there anything that's really like?
In reference to this project, I suppose there are other projects like there was mass animation. One of the problems that a lot of people had with mass animation was the fact that only the people who did the highest voted shot version of a particular shot got their work in the film and got credited and rewarded for it, and everybody else was not acknowledged at all, sort of thing.
That's the same thing that happened with the DC online.
Same principle. And the downside to that is it did mean that in my mind there was a very large effort out there in the world that even the producers weren't necessarily all that aware of, that was wasted. It seemed to me like that was slightly, I don't want to say it, but it seemed like not necessarily 100% moral.
Inefficient.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other problem was just that if you really boiled it down, even though they were offering prize money and credits and things like that, at the end of the day they were paying a very, very small amount of money for animation. So when we went off, started doing it, my focus was always on, okay, if I assign somebody a task, my focus is with that person, and my commitment is to them as theirs is to me. And I wasn't going to double up and give a second person the same task and just wait and see who did a better job. That has almost never happened. It has on a few occasions. I think there have been occasions where somebody's not finished a task. We've not heard from them for a very, very long time. I've assumed they've abandoned it. I've then given it to somebody else who starts the task. And then the first person comes out of the blue and says, oh, I did some more stuff for you. But what can you do? In that particular case, it's just a bit awkward and I have to explain to them what happened. But that is as close as we ever get to that. The rest of the time, it's a one-to-one commitment. But that downside is it takes longer. And sometimes it can be a real struggle to get certain shots through, because if a shot is unpopular, you can't just throw 100 people at doing that shot until it gets done. You have one person. If that person doesn't do well with it, that task fails and you have to start again with another person. So some things take a bit longer than I would like, but it's at least I feel good about it.
It seems like the thing that works, that you, I don't know, it seems like what's different from your project than the other ones that I've heard about is the one-on-one kind of, like you're talking to these people as people and there's a mutual level of respect, and I know that you're working hard and you know that I'm working hard. We're trying to make something cool together as a collaborative. I mean, would you find that that's really the secret to success in a project like this? Is speaking to them as if they're people and not slaves
yes,
and workers?
As much as possible. I try to get to know somebody. The trouble is there can be a lot of people sometimes. I mean, we have over 350 people signed up, and most of them are animators, probably 90%.
Wow.
No, maybe more like 80.
Yeah.
At one point it was 70, and I know a lot more animators have continued to pile on. So we can't give that many animators tasks, so there is a point at which it almost becomes a bit like a numbers game. And certainly in the earlier stages there's a little bit of, I'll admit, so I copy and paste some emails and things in order to at least give them the basic information, as we've already explained it. You've got to give them certain information and not spend too much time doing it yourself. But then once they've responded and they've engaged properly and you can see that they're up to the task, that's when it has to be one-on-one. But yeah, to some degree, I still feel guilty that somewhere along the line you feel like, I feel a bit like I'm treating these people like numbers sometimes. And I know I haven't given everybody as much attention as I would like. But it's just not possible when there's 350 people trying to get on the project.
Well, and if you say, like, if they're properly engaged, they're going to be talking to other people that are signed up, and yeah, they'll be taking a lot of that responsibility on themselves, I would imagine. So.
Yes.
Okay, well, you've been working on the project for 5 years now. It's quite a long time. What's something? And you're about 6 months out, you said, or?
I think so. I mean, it really depends. If I do any other freelance work, that might slow things down a bit. But essentially, if I was to stick to it full time, I think we're probably going to finish close to the end of the year or early next year, something like that.
Now, is there an overlying, I guess, thing that you've learned, or what's the one thing you've pulled out of this, whole situation?
Don't be crazy and do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot to learn. I mean, making a film, there's so many different aspects to it that you learn a lot just making a film. I mean, you do one shot, you learn a lot. You do an entire film, you learn a lot, even more. But you try and create an entire social network, and that no one really has done much of before, and you learn even more. I mean, I've had to learn so many things about just how the internet works, how people's engagement works, and how faith works. And when I say faith, it's because you essentially, in fact, this is something I figured out fairly early. A lot of the reason that projects would die is because people weren't seeing enough. They didn't know enough about what other people were doing. They didn't see enough progress, and therefore they lost faith in the project and moved on. And so a lot of it is just ensuring that you have a system in place that feeds that faith and ensures everybody can see what everybody else is doing. So that's why we're very visual. We have images and videos, and I spend most of my time nagging people to put their pictures and their videos in the gallery so that everybody sees them, because that builds the faith that So one person does a piece of work, they put it in. The next person sees that that work was done, they feel good that the project is moving on, they do their work and they put their work in, and so on. Now some people might argue, oh, I'm an animator, I want to get all the best shots, so I don't want to, why would I want to feed the faith of other animators? But it's not just animators, you're feeding the faith of, you're actually building up and encouraging the lighters and the composer and all of these people, and they're supporting the animators. So at the end of the day, we just kind of have to look past it all and say we're all helping each other out, and the more visual we can be, the more we can help each other out, the more it builds the faith. And this, I think, is the main reason that this project has been so successful beyond most other short projects. Because besides doing it this way and keeping an eye on maintaining the faith, the only other way to do it is in one room, you know, with people in one studio. Besides that, I think most projects would fall apart.
Now, you said opportunity earlier. You kind of mentioned that as one of the things that you learned. What do you mean by that?
Oh, well, all it is when people ask me now what my goal is for this project, it really is just one single goal, and that is to create opportunity. As I said earlier there, I didn't feel like I'd had all the opportunities I wanted to get, so doing the film was about creating opportunity for me, but it's also about creating opportunities for everybody who works on it. And the other reason I say that the goal is opportunity is because in some ways we just can't predict what opportunities there are out there. It's easy to say, oh, I want to put the film in the festival, win some awards, and become the next great director. But it's a very single-minded way to do things, and if you're only focused on doing that, you might miss out on lots of other things that could happen. And the more you're focused on only that, the less opportunities there are to follow up on those other things. So we just kind of, I'm staying pretty open-minded about where this could go and what opportunities could come out of it. I mean, we were already started to say how in just the time that I've been working on the film, the way that video has been released to the world has changed dramatically. You know, it used to be all about putting your film on a Betamax tape and sending it over to a festival. But by the time we're finished, everything will be digital. We'll be looking at whether we can get a film into Netflix, or will iTunes even be relevant at that point? Because it's once upon a time the dream was, oh, well, you can get your movie into iTunes and sell it for $1.99, but who wants to pay $1.99 to watch a 5-minute short film from someone they've never heard of?
And the market is totally...
So it's completely changed. Yeah, I mean, and we can't predict where it could be 6 months or a year from now. So just we keep our eyes open, we follow up on a lot of opportunities and see where things take us and stay open-minded to it.
Very cool. Yeah, I can't wait to see the final thing. And you guys just released the trailer, and you know that's pretty much everything. Everything is done, right? Everything's finalized and that.
Nothing's ever done.
You guys are releasing it officially.
We're releasing it officially, saying that is the final teaser trailer, so that we can focus on the rest of the film now, because we've essentially been developing 2 films at the same time. I planned to make the trailer at a very early stage so that I knew I would have shots for the trailer. So I prioritized the shots that were going to appear in the trailer and tried to work it out that way.
And you had all the versions of the trailer visual, like up for anyone to see.
Yeah.
Like throughout.
So in some ways it's not fresh because a lot of people have seen it, but hopefully the people who haven't seen it will see our final one because we'll push it a little bit harder.
Now, someone who isn't familiar with the project and keeps up with it consistently, where would you prefer that they go online to keep up to date?
.com?
The most obvious place is to go to www.devilsangelsandating.com.
And now that's updated more than the Facebook page, or about the same? You can keep them.
It's essentially a one-page splash page where they can see quickly what the project's about and watch the latest teaser trailer. And then if they go up into the corner, they can follow links to Facebook, Twitter, or our development page where they can see a lot more.
Is there the YouTube one there too, to follow the videos?
Yes, I think there is, yeah.
Excellent, yeah.
Very cool. And you have your podcasts and all the information about that, and also your personal website too that people can check out. Shane, you got any websites you want people to check out?
Well, I mean, I have my personal website, but I mean, you're not going to find as much information than at Michael's in comparison. But Tyrant 3D is my personal one.
And you also are, one of the the main guys doing the Austin Autodesk users group. You want to talk about that at all?
Well, I mean, it's only going to benefit, people in Austin or greater Texas, but hopefully it could encourage people to start their own chapters in their own city. So, yeah, I mean, it's a monthly user group or bi-monthly or however long that you want it to be. But getting creative people in one room talking about a certain part of tech, not just film, not just game, but everything in digital arts. But, so since I started being the chairman, it's been going good. I wanted to just not focus just on games, so
it's very part of the group. It's been sometimes about 50 people.
So yeah, we were over 60 on the one with Martin there, but I think a lot of people only came because he used to work at ILM, which is kind of everyone should be out there every day, but every month. But so I think next month's going to be with Brad Clark talking about what was it? Motion, mocap and animation layers, and then we're going to have the roundtable of the SIGGRAPH, aftermath.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Well, very cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, you have some cool stories. I guess we can kind of cut this in after the fact, kind of fit it into the right spot. But what are some speed bumps, or not necessarily speed bumps, but some interesting things you've had to deal with that not necessarily everybody as an animator deals with?
I would argue against that. I would say a lot of animators do come across these things. Okay, the surprise, I suppose, is that when you start in this business, you've probably seen a lot of Disney DVD extras, and you see the glamour side of working in the business.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of less glamorous things, and I know everybody will have their own stories. I'm trying to think which one was most appropriate to go with now.
Yeah, I think anyone that's worked on an animated film, I think all of us share the same pain.
They before getting into it, even at school, it seems like a lot of people talk about how awesome it is and how great, and that everybody has their own, their own story and their own journey that they go through to get to where you want to be.
Absolutely, I didn't know it was going to be this hard. Wow, I remember
If you had, would you have done it?
I don't know. I mean, my parents said to me, don't be an architect. Your uncle was an architect, and it took 8 years for him to become an architect. But when I think about the struggles of the journey that I've come on, I'm thinking it wasn't that bad, maybe to be an architect. But I wouldn't exchange it for anything else. But it has been tricky. It has been. There's been a lot of trials along the way. And you think we've had plenty of projects where crunch has been ridiculous and off the scale. I mean, certainly when you're in earlier points in your career, you don't know how much you should push back when you work. So perhaps some experiences I've had, they've taken advantage of the people who are on the teams. So I've had some crazy crunches. But when I say a crunch, these might be I was effectively in crunch for 3 years at one point. No, 3.5 years. So essentially working an average of about every 6 days a week and until quite late at night. And that really burns you out. Somewhere along the line I figured out that the same production was cutting enough of the work that it wasn't worth putting in the extra hours because they would cut that much anyway. So you the next project out, had a very different approach, and I decided, right, I do my core hours and I'll only give them the overtime when there's a major deadline coming up. So if you're approaching some sort of big trade show or or the completion of the project, fine, I'll put in the extra hours because I know it's going to be seen. But up to that point, I would get into a habit of more reasonable hours and try to have a life. And I'm really, really glad I did it, and I wish I'd done it years earlier.
Well, and you just got married and you're starting a family.
Absolutely.
Now. I mean, do you feel like that's something that you now have time for that you didn't have time for before, or?
Well, yeah. I mean, I can't even see. There's no way I could have be in the position I am in now if I'd carried on the way I was going, doing the crazy hours that I was doing. Now I'm a married man and very happy.